Hello, my friends. This is Lynda Lippin, and welcome to the Pilates Goddess podcast. Well, hello, everybody, once again, and welcome to the Pilates Goddess podcast. This is your host, Lynda Lippin, and I am very, very excited about today's topic for discussion, which is making Pilates safe again. You may notice a little theme over the past few weeks, months of the podcast, which is really lack of comprehensive teacher training and therefore questionable safety in a lot of Pilates studios. I always pick out the franchise brand studios for this, but in fact, it affects every studio. Okay. Pilates teacher training in many ways is kind of like a multi-level marketing situation right now. A lot of studios start teacher training simply because they don't have enough teachers or they want an additional source of revenue. And then what happens is they create more new teachers, usually hire the new teachers or the apprentices, and then kind of start the whole cycle again with hopefully those teachers and apprentices bringing in their friends and their clients to also go through the teacher training program. And it just, becomes a thing that feeds on itself. So I wanted to actually start this podcast by sharing my own experiences in coming into a chain studio. So we had a few years ago, the major international Pilates chain moved into my neighborhood, into Tribeca. And I want you to know right now that even though a lot of you see me as purely a classical teacher, I am not. That is why I did teacher training for physical mind for so many years. That is why I love the MVE chair and I love the Tyfor and I love a lot of things that aren't, historical or classical things, but you can still use them in a Pilates session. But I went to a free introductory class because again, I live in the neighborhood and I really had a not great class. And it was a not great class on many levels. Okay. First of all, because it was intro classes, they weren't really leveling the classes at that point. From what I can tell, the franchise does level classes into level 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5. But these intro classes were unleveled. So we had, people who had never done Pilates before and people who had been doing Pilates for years. I was very clear about the fact that I knew Pilates, but I didn't go in telling anybody that I was a Pilates teacher. And I do that specifically, frankly, because as I've shared on the podcast before, I have a lot of injuries. I have a lot of chronic pain. I have a lot of arthritis. I've got spine stuff. And I typically, if I walk into a place and they recognize my name or they recognize me from online, or I talk about the fact that I've been, a Pilates teacher for over 34 years, everyone wants to give me super advanced work and a lot of hands-on stretching. And that is, quite frankly, not what I need. So I actually prefer it. And it's hard to do, especially in my neighborhood, right? Because during the time that this chain opened, Real Pilates was, 3 blocks away. And I was a master teacher there for over a decade. So, people kind of knew me. But anyway, so I went in and I basically said to the teacher, I've got some stuff. I pretty much know how to modify it, but please don't try to adjust my feet. Like, don't try to stretch me. Don't try to stretch my toes, nothing like that, because I was just a year or two out of my great left toe crush of 2013. And I was still dealing with a lot of pain and inflammation from that. So we start class, and we did the reformer class in a very strange order that really didn't make a lot of sense to me, especially not for new clients, and especially not for a mixed level group. We did a lot of flexion. We did tons of work on our backs. Of course, you know that the first place the teacher grabbed to adjust me in an exercise was during like running or tendon stretch or something. And I don't mean tendon stretch, calf stretch, at the end of footwork. And she like grabbed my feet and grabbed my toes because my left toe wasn't bending as much, because it doesn't, because it's got arthritis from when I crushed my toe. And that caused me pain. So I was like, ow, please don't. And she stopped. But at the end of class, I was just, I don't know, I wasn't thrilled. And I had so many questions, because I need you to know that for years I used balanced body equipment. I am familiar with the Bozu. I'm familiar with the MVE chair. I'm familiar with the spring wall. I'm familiar with the Allegro reformers. But somehow this class like made no sense. It did not follow the order of the exercises. It had some stuff that was really, really advanced. It had some stuff that was just so beginner that it almost wasn't worth it. And when I left, I went on to a more contemporary Pilates teachers Facebook group and said, look, I know there's a lot of folks who own or work at these studios in the country, possibly in other boroughs in the city. This is the class that I took. This is the list of exercises that we did in the order in which we did them. And I just said, is this typical of a class? My thought process here, in case you're wondering, was that I know that I can be anywhere in the world and walk into a McDonald's and I know what I'm going to get. In fact, funny story, when we were still living in Turks and Caicos and had just gone over to Parrot Key, we had to do an emergency flight over to Nassau, Bahamas for an emergency surgery. And while we were there, we happened to be staying at a hotel that was right down the block and across the street from a McDonald's franchise. And we had probably been living in Turks and Caicos at that point for about 2.5 years. We had not been out of that country in those 2.5 years, other than to go to like the Dominican Republic or other places close by. And, I looked at my husband and said, I know you might not be feeling that great, but you want some McDonald's for dinner? And I ran over and I got the, burgers and the fries and the chicken nuggets and just like the whole thing. And it was so good. And even though we were in the Bahamas, McDonald's was still McDonald's, tasted like McDonald's, presented like McDonald's, and was great. By the same token, I also know that if I walk into a Ruth Chris Steakhouse or a Morton's Steakhouse, I know exactly what I'm going to get. It doesn't matter where I am in the world. It doesn't matter what the climate is. I know that I'm going to walk into Morton's and they're going to have the big steak and they're going to have the cream spinach and they're going to have the potatoes done a certain way and whatever, because that is their menu and that is their consistency. So I kind of thought to myself, if this is a franchise operation, then there should be consistency between the studios and the classes. Alas, my friends, that is not the case. So even in franchise chain Pilates studios, you are going to have different owners, you're going to have different quality of instructors, and you may have a very different class experience depending on where you are. Now, I was pretty much viciously attacked by all of the contemporary Pilates teachers for even asking the question. I was accused of baiting the franchise. They asked me why I would go to the new studio versus coming over to Brooklyn or, wherever the other studios were. This was the first one on the island of Manhattan. Um, and I was like, guys, like I barely like to leave my neighborhood, and I live down by the Brooklyn Bridge. I rarely go above Canal Street. And if I go above 14th Street, it's like a big fucking deal. So I was like, you expect me to get on a train and go to a different borough to do my workout? Absolutely not. Like the part of the draw of this was that the studio was close to my home, that it wasn't the studio I work at, and that it was a studio with equipment that I know. Right. And I was kind of interested to see how they put it together and thought, that this could be a place where I could just go get a workout in close to home when I didn't feel like going into the studio where I work and go that route. But the attack on me at that point, which was like, you just went in to be mean. You just went in as a classically trained Pilates teacher. And I was like, no, actually, I went in because it's in the neighborhood and I thought it might be a good workout, and it wasn't. But that kind of made me wonder, if Pilates and the presentation of Pilates and Pilates teaching isn't even consistent in a franchise, then how are we expecting safety and consistency in studios and classes in gyms and community centers, and especially in large group classes? The other thing that I am struggling with around this topic is that there are a lot of folks with injuries and chronic pain and osteoporosis and back shit, who are being sent to studios and are coming in to do group classes. And they are basically expecting Pilates to be this kind of safe workout because Pilates has been a safe workout for so long and is touted as being so good for, strength and mobility and backs and all the things. But it's not going to necessarily be a safe environment if you're dealing with inconsistency in how teachers are trained and how teachers are allowed to teach. So what do we do here? I did an interview with Joan Breitbart from the Physical Mind Institute where we talked about how Pilates is at a crossroads right now. I've done a couple of interviews here with Alan Menezes from, who brought Pilates to the Southern Hemisphere and to Australia. And he said the same thing, that he's getting fully certified teachers that are walking into his studio looking for jobs who don't know how to teach. They might know the order of the exercises, they might know the exercises, but they actually don't know how to teach the different bodies that are coming in. And if you haven't been taught how to do that and how to categorize the exercises, how to categorize movements so that they're easy to modify, then you are potentially running an unsafe Pilates class. There's also been several discussions online in several different Facebook groups of Pilates professionals and Pilates clients around how do we modify for the one or two people who might have a low bone density, who might have disc herniations or whatever else. Sometimes these people don't want to be picked out or called out in class. They want to be doing the work the way everybody else is. And this is a legitimate concern. But the safety of your client is also of the highest concern when they're in your studio. Trust me that if you have a client come in with osteoporosis and you choose in that class situation to not modify any of that client's exercise for osteoporosis because they don't like it, okay? So you just decide that you're not going to do it. You're going to let that client do what everybody else is doing in the same way. And that client has a compression fracture, and there's some investigation by the insurance company, and they discover that they told you that they had osteoporosis and low bone density, and you chose not to modify the exercises for them. You're the one who's going to be in trouble. You're the one who's going to be paying. What I often do, and here's a little trick for you, okay? What I often do is if I have one person in my class who I know is at risk of reherniating a disc or having a compression fracture in their thoracic spine from low bone density, I will modify the class for everybody. And it doesn't always have to be a downgrade, okay? You can ask any of my clients online about the work I've done with them through and around osteoporosis and low bone density, and they will tell you that the exercises are as hard done modified for low bone density, if not harder, than they are done normally. And I'm going to give you a few examples of this. So say you've got somebody with osteoporosis, one or two people in your class, you got 10 other people, and you start with your footwork like one does if you're doing, group reformer or group mat. If you're doing group mat, have them all stand up and do standing footwork. And if you don't know this series, I teach it in my Pilates Teacher Mastermind VIP program. There's videos on YouTube. You can find what the standing footwork is. It looks relevantly similar to the reformer supine footwork. And then you have them do the 100, but you just tell everybody that for today, you're going to keep the head down because you want them to feel how, if they keep their upper body down and they're not curling their ribs towards their hips, how they have to have their legs possibly up at a higher angle because it's harder to keep the connection of the psoas holding the spine and the legs in one place. Okay, so you just teach it without the head curl. See? And then maybe you do your frog and your leg circles and whatever else, and that's all fine. Maybe you come to coordination, and once again, you teach coordination with the head down. Okay, and you tell people that you want them to work deeper through their abdominals with less worry about neck strain or something like that. See where I'm going with this? And then maybe if you're doing short box with them, you don't do the curling back, but you do the flat back reach, and you do small head lead rotation, and maybe you do a little bit of side bending, and maybe just a leg stretch for tree with the chest lifted so that everyone works on their stability and their stabilization. Long stretches are fine because you're prone, and even rounding in a prone position is fine for low bone density. You can do, the long stretch, the down stretch, you can do the up stretch, you can do elephant, you can do the long back stretch or the tricep dips. There's so much you can do. You want to give people a challenge, have them do the knees off knee stretches. You want to give people a challenge, have them do stomach massage while keeping their chest lifted instead of rounded, and then go into the rotation and maybe single leg versions. So there's, once again, so much that you can do in a class setting. If you're teaching group mat, it's the same thing. So maybe you're teaching mat and we do some standing footwork, which you call standing footwork, and you let people go into smaller ranges of motion with their hip and knee flexion if they wish, even though they are technically doing a whole standing squat series. Then maybe you bring them down to the mat. And once again, you keep the head down for the 100. Maybe you just do some nice arm circles and some mobility work instead of doing the roll up. You do some hip hinge bridging with knee lifts instead of the roll over. Leg circles are generally still going to be fine for everybody, not a problem. You can take that whole abdominal series and you can still do it on the back with the head down. Or you can take the whole ab series and put it into a different relationship to gravity if your clients are super strong. Have them be in a plank and alternate bringing their knees into their chest like a mountain climber, but slower. There's your single leg stretch. For double leg stretch, you can start them in a plank, have them sit their weight back towards their heels, bending their knees, and then coming back out into the plank. See where I'm going? See what I'm doing with this? You can do leg pull front support with the opposite leg lift instead of doing scissors. For double leg lower lift, you can either have them come up into a high pike like a downward dog and then back into plank, or you can, bring them back on their back and have them keep the head down. And then for crisscross, which is, flexion combined with rotation, so it's contraindicated for a lot of people, have them be on all fours and do a bird dog of opposite arm and leg and bring the elbow and knee together under them, because it's okay to do that flexion and rotation when you're what? Prone. Okay? Side kick series, all that stuff's going to be fine. Bridging, fine. Any kind of side lift, the kneeling side kick for a lot of folks is going to be perfectly fine and very difficult. All of the extension work is going to be great. So, and then for things like spine stretch or things like saw, just keep the upper body lifted and do a little bit more of a hinge and reach. So once you kind of understand what the movements are, then it becomes easy to modify them. And then every once in a while, you're just going to do a fully modified class. And as you're teaching the class, you know that there's still going to be people who are going to curl up their head and do that for the ab series for the 100 and whatever. And if you know that they are fine with their spines, then you'll let them, but they will then be the outliers. Do you see what I mean? It won't be the people with osteoporosis and back and neck pain who are feeling like the outliers who aren't doing what you ask. The people who decide they want to do the full form of the exercise will then be the outliers not doing what you ask. And the people who need to be safer will be safer and they'll feel really good about it and they'll still get a great workout. And this is how we make Pilates safe again, is that we start with teaching to the people who could actually get hurt in the class. So as a teacher, don't struggle with modifying for that person in class who has the hip replacement, the issue, the back pain, whatever. Or just bill your classes as classes for people with chronic pain and stuff. Like my Strong Bones Pilates classes are for women over 50 who have low bone density and or chronic pain. I have women in my class who have actually started out with osteoporosis, have increased their bone density without medication, and now do the full forms of the exercises if they want to. But I don't teach any of the rolling exercises. I don't teach any of the legs overhead exercises at all in my classes. My clients are fine. Okay. And they are doing really well and getting stronger all the time. So I can have a class sometimes where I have a fellow 30-year teaching Pilates client who has old Achilles tendon tear injuries, where I have an ex-gymnast who's now an academic who's in her 70s who still has a lot of back stuff and some some hip stuff from years of doing gymnastics and dance. Then I'll have another client in the group who has both hips replaced, right? So maybe her leg circles are a little bit different or a little bit smaller than everybody else's because she doesn't go across the body as much. I mean, all of this, and I do all of that online. So if you're live with people, you should be able to more easily work through a safe class for everybody. Allow for some cat-cow for some spine movement. Allow for a little bit of rotation for spine movement. Allow for a little bit of side bending, things like the side kicks, kneeling side kicks, the side lift, all of these are going to be great exercises for everybody. For everybody. So think about how to categorize the exercises. Number one, look at spine position, right? If you listen to Joan Breibart's core conversations or body conversations, you will hear us discussing the 10 basic spine positions that human beings can do, and then examples of where those show up in a Pilates studio. I think if you start to look at shapes, start to look at the external shapes of movement, then when you get somebody in your class who can't do flexion from the top, and they have issues, say, with flexion from the top or flexion from the bottom, then you know what to modify or leave out automatically, but that still leaves you all of the extension, the hyperextension, the rotation, the side bending exercises. So there's still a lot that can be done. Keep your clients safe. Keep your classes safe, but also keep them challenging. And you're also going to find, look, there are clients who are hyperextension intolerant, people with stenosis, people with spondylolisthesis, like those people exist as well. And for them, the flexion is great and the hyperextension isn't. So once again, if you teach a safe modified class where you focus mostly on movements of stability and strength, then pretty much everybody's going to be safe and happy. And the outliers will be the folks who are, say, doing the traditional exercises or the exercises as they were taught first, while everybody else in the class is doing the modified version that you're teaching. And they don't have to know that it's why the modification is there. You can just say, I want to give you a different challenge today. And that way, no one's embarrassed. No one feels weird about their back pain or their neck pain or their low bone density. But you're never putting anybody in an unsafe position in your class or your studio. And also note, pay attention when people say don't touch me or don't touch a specific area of me because I'm injured there and it's not good. Don't touch them there. Just throwing it out there. Just try to avoid that. All right. So I hope you guys found this helpful. If you did, I would love it if you would share this podcast, and if you would go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Podchaser and leave a rating and possibly a written review. The written reviews, especially on Apple Podcasts, is really important to how many new people get to see the podcast and listen to the podcast without my direct input or direct marketing or direct posting. So it is a big, huge help. And plus, it's just nice and it's fun. I love writing good reviews for things that I love. So I encourage you, if you love this, to help a girl out and go on in and write a lovely written review. Now, if you are a Pilates client or a Pilates teacher in pain and you would like some input into what to do for your own workout, for your own body, then go on over to lyndalippin.com, click on Strong Bones, Women Over 50, and check out my programming there. If you are a Pilates instructor and you are interested in just more support, more discussion, and more in-depth training, including, recaps of the entire Pilates system on all of the apparatus, come on over and join me in Pilates Teacher Mastermind VIP. Same thing, just come on over to lyndalippin.com, spelled just like my name, and click on Pilates Teachers, and it will take you right to that page. I also have 2 free Facebook groups with tons of information. There's Strong Bones Pilates, which is about bone density and chronic pain. And there is the Pilates Teacher Mastermind free group where I spend a lot of time and we talk about all things teaching Pilates. Of course, not necessarily as in depth as I go in the subscription VIP program, which, by the way, is only $47 a month. And the minute you join, you will have access to 24 teacher training, continuing education videos on everything from teaching Pilates to clients with osteoporosis, back and neck pain, diastasis recti and hernia, joint replacements, all kinds of fun and exciting things, as well as tips to work on your mindset, build your business, get better at sales and marketing, and run your own programs, whether online, in person, or a combination thereof. I would love to see you guys in either group or both. And of course, as always, thank you so, so much for listening, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you so much for listening to the Pilates Goddess podcast. Music brought to you by Nerd Salad. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, especially if you liked it. And please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks.